designs. Okay. As we all know, we are here for the Design Sprint Masterclass. So before we get deeper into it, who am I? Who's speaking today? My name is Aadhya. I'm a design director at Shanor. I have a design sprint master. I have won many awards and I have trained the design sprint across the world. I'm a speaker and facilitator. So I will be the one conducting your session today. Very nice to meet all of you. Before we get into what actually is the design sprint, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the world today. The problems, the industry, the current state of affairs. Chat-GPT has started, there's fear of jobs. We're setting a new foundation and humans are trying to stay relevant and resilient in this changing atmosphere. So we need something that's beyond what we were able to do a few years ago. We need to adapt, we need to evolve, and we need to learn. But all of this starts with empathy. But empathy is an easy word, but how do you actually go about it? What is empathy? So it's all about the people and behavior. It's about emotions that we feel. It's about how we behave in particular situations. So this is the formula that states B is equal to F, P, and E. For all of you who are not aware, this is the Lewin's equation. This formula states that behavior is a function of the person, is environment. So the behavior of a person changes or evolves in a particular situation. What does that mean? We've all witnessed this. We behave very differently at work and we behave very differently at home. Our behavior is not equal across the situations or across different environments. And that's what Lewin's principle talks about. Now that we understand empathy, let's move forward into understanding what exactly is the design sprint and how does this help us in the design sprint. So the design sprint is actually a proven methodology of solving problems through designing, prototyping, and testing ideas with users. Design sprint is a framework that helps teams answer critical business requirements through designing, prototyping, and testing out ideas, and also having a validated solution by the end of the sprint with live users. So ultimately, this is a tool for developing a hypothesis, prototyping an idea, and testing it rapidly with as little investment of time and money as possible in as real an environment as possible. So the design sprint is actually an immersive experience where a team comes together to collaborate, focuses on one particular problem, and makes progress on that problem using design thinking methods in rapid succession. And everything is time boxed, so we don't waste any time. Usually, the process of coming up with a solution to any problem takes months and months, and sometimes a lot of brainstorming happens. But the design sprint actually allows us to speed up that process so that we can get into a validated solution by the end of just a few days. And that way, we don't have to spend too much of our time on problems that we might not be able to solve at the moment. And of course, everyone is involved, so that's fun as well. So design sprints effectively accelerates decision-making. Decision-making in any organization takes time. People need to be aware. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of communication. But in a design sprint, because it is so rapid in its design, that it's so quick to come up with decision and move forward with the way we want to adhere to that challenge and how do we want to go forward with it. And I find a realistic, applicable solution at an accelerated pace that we usually don't have. Because it solves problems fast and validates solutions quickly, the design sprint is highly effective and one of my favorite methodologies when it comes to problem solving. So otherwise, it is risky and ambiguous. A lot of the times, teams don't talk to each other. We're isolated from each other. So there's a lot of misunderstanding and ambiguity that is evolved when we are in that situation. But this methodology allows us to actually be in one room and talk about what is happening and actually communicate our opinion, our thought process, and what we feel the solution should be. And everyone is heard, so no one feels isolated. Now, why are sprints so different and how can it help us? So the sprints actually foster a shared language and an equal sense of ownership, which results in this sweet spot because different teams of different departments merge together and come together for the sprint. And this allows faster turnaround where multiple teams can make quick decisions and move forward. But what is the thought process? How does a sprint actually function? Well, the sprint has the divergence thinking and the convergence thinking. This is also known as the double diamond. Divergence is, think of it like we are fishermen. When a fisherman throws his net out to sea, that is when he doesn't know how much fish he's going to catch. That is divergence thinking, where we expand our horizons, think beyond our limits, and see what all possible applications of a solution could be. And then we converge, where we bring together all of this and see which one can we actually go forward with. And that's what we will use throughout the sprint. And how is this sprint methodology and double diamond used? It is used like this. The sprint is divided into 5 methodologies as per the book in 2016, which is the sprint book written by Jake Knapp. But recently, we have also added another step. So it's not enough to just understand what our problem is. It is also very important to be able to define what it is. And as you can see, we diverge and converge at every step of the way so that we are able to expand our horizons, but also focus on the next step that we want to actually go forward with and actually come up with a validated solution by the end of it. Now, what does the sprint 5-day breakdown look like? So the sprint is actually traditionally 5 days, but of course we can customize it, and I will show you how we can customize it to multiple different days and maybe reduce the days. But the traditional sprint is broken down like this. The day 1 is where we do mapping out the problem. This is when the team comes together to actually collect all the possible information about what is the problem and set the goal that we want to focus on for the rest of the days. And once we have set that target and have set that challenge, we can move on to day 2. Day 2 is where we actually, like the word says, sketch. We actually sketch out and start conceptualizing our possible solutions, our possible ways to solve the problem that we have come up with in day 1. And day 3, of course, is to make a decision on what step do we move forward. And decision making is where we pivot in this project and in this solution and come to prototyping. Prototyping, as the word is when we actually build out our solution so that we can, on day 5, test it out with real users and get real user feedback. This whole process is highly interactive and user-focused. Of course, we cannot forget the before and after the sprint because we have to prepare for that as well. Right? Now that we understand what the breakdown of the sprint is, what exactly is the purpose of a design sprint? Why do you need to have it? Why is it a skill that you need to have? And how would you benefit within your organization? Well, a design sprint actually avoids a lot of misunderstandings and miscommunications that can happen, especially when it's about the final delivery. And design sprints also encourage original thinking because it allows you to do experimentation and iterations of a particular solution for a problem that you're trying to solve. Whereas usually we are not encouraged to fail, design sprint actually gives us an avenue to see if the solution is worth it. And if it fails, and that's okay because we have not invested too much time in it. And it's also possible to explore ideas that we typically would have probably rejected because it's not what the company is used to. And prototyping and sketching also reduces the cost of failure. Because traditionally what happens is we come up with a product, we come up with a solution, and we send it out to market so that we can get a validated solution. It takes months, it's a lot of work. And if the product fails, that entire months and months of work and coming up with that solution is a waste. But in the sprint, because it's just 5 days, it actually allows us to fail fast, learn quickly, and move on. It also jumpstarts the decision making, as mentioned before, because the way it is designed, the decision making cannot take too much time because we have to move on to the next step. It also prioritizes user feedback at every step of the way. Companies may take months or even years sometimes to develop a product before testing it with users and figuring out if it is what the customer actually wants, if it's what the user actually needs. But with the design sprint, the goal is to create a working prototype and testing it with users within just a week. And incorporating that user feedback into the very beginning of the design process so that we can close that loop and design for the users. It also increases team cohesion because most often teams are people are from different departments. Once my team is done, we move it to the next team, and I don't know what happened with that solution. This allows us to actually have ownership over the solution that we come up with and be part of that process, even when it's someone else's skill set. Now, how does the design sprint actually work? The design sprint allows us to have all the stakeholders in one room. The clients are the experts. We bring in experts who can talk and give you real-time feedback about what's happening. And of course, you can get started getting things done. There is a voting mechanism, so everything is democratic. Nobody is unheard. Everybody's opinion, ideas are heard. There is together, alone, and then focus on the user, because we get to work as a group, and we also have independent individual tasks that we can complete so that we can put our thought process before we actually pitch it to our team and then to the users. So everybody is heard and no voice is shunned. And fifth but not the least, everything is time boxed. So everything has its own set of time, and we will adhere to that during the sprint. And of course, this is a process that needs to be experienced and we can go about it. But now that we understand what is the purpose of the sprint, what exactly happens in a design sprint, you might have that question on who is it for? Who is the design sprint actually made for? Well, design sprints can be for leaders, managers, executives, designers, marketers, engineers, facilitators, team leads, sprint pros, developers, scrum masters, agile coaches, but most importantly, it's for everybody who is somebody, and it doesn't matter which industry you're in or what are your focus on. Everybody can benefit from the design sprint. So don't go by the word design, go by the word sprint. Okay. Now, how do we actually prepare for a sprint? What happens before the sprint is actually come into place and we actually start going about? It's most important to actually choose a problem. We might have multiple problems, but what exactly is the priority? What exactly are we trying to solve? And what should be the next thing that we focus all of our efforts in coming up with a solution for? So understanding that basic problem is the first step. Then, of course, is you assemble the Avengers or assemble your team so that we know the diverse roles that are going to be participants in the sprint, who are they, and also, of course, invite them so that they are aware that the design sprint is happening. Then, of course, then secure and prepare the space. Now, this can be one of two ways. If it's a physical sprint, then you will have to maybe book a physical room with some stationery, and we'll get to that later. But it can also be done virtually with a virtual whiteboard, right? So it can be done one of two ways, and there's no restrictions on how we can go about the sprint. But these are what we do before the sprint is actually taken place. Now that we have a plan, what actually goes about in preparation? It is to actually invite the people. It is actually to move forward with it. It's actually to get the stationery, get the people, make sure everybody is aware of the plan, send out emails. All of that happens in the preparation. And let's not forget the sprint challenge. That's the problem that we are going to focus the next sprint on. That one, and the brief also needs to be sent while we are preparing for the sprint. Now coming on to the day of the sprint. What actually happens on the day of the sprint? Well, we invite our team members to come in, and we also invite experts on the subject, people who can give you a different perspective on the problem that you're trying to solve, on the sprint challenge that you're trying to solve. We have a setup of a checklist. We have scripts that will be used when we talk to our experts and our users. There's a digital timer, and there is a daily checklist to keep us on time. The morning prep, of course, involves coming in early, bringing in all the materials that we need, and setting up the space. And of course, double checking all the technology so that technology is not the one that's coming in the way. Once we have all this set up and our team is in, we can begin the sprint. Now, how to actually run the design sprint? And as I mentioned, what exactly is the sprint challenge that I was talking about? Well, the most important aspect of the sprint is actually the sprint challenge. This will help you solve the problem that we are going to spend the next 5 days on. So these are some important questions that we will ask when we are coming up with a perfect or a priority sprint challenge, which is, what are we trying to solve during this sprint cycle? What will be the solution to this challenge? Who are we designing the solution for? Because it's not enough to understand the problem. It's also important to understand our users. And why is all this important? What are we going to get? What's the value out of creating a solution for this particular challenge? This sets the foundation for a design sprint, and especially for a successful design sprint. Without a strong, robust sprint challenge, the rest of the sprint can go well, and we might not get the results that we hoped or we started the sprint for. So this is the first and the foundational step for a design sprint. Now let's go deeper into the phases of the design sprint. Phase 1, which I mentioned, is understanding. Understanding is actually where we map out our problem statement, break it down into goals, action items, and also success metrics. So it's important for us to set a vision on what we believe will happen with our solution in the next 6 months, 1 year, maybe 5 years into the future. But it's also important to quantify that. How do we successfully measure what actually will happen with our solution? So we set all of those priorities beforehand and in the understanding phase. This is also the phase where we have something called the lightning talks, which is where we invite people from the industry who are experts on the topic that we are trying to solve, so that they can have a talk with us on what exactly is their perspective being part of that industry, and how do we actually move forward with it, and if we are going in the right direction. So this is all the information that we collect during the understand day, which is day 1 of the sprint. And this is the foundational day, because you're setting this day up is setting for the rest of the sprint and to make it successful as well. Now coming to what is phase 2, which is defining. Now that we have all of this information, we understand what the team wants to focus on, we understand what the experts have told us, we need to define our problem, come up with an actual specific context so that our solution is built according to that. And of course, what is the desired outcomes of this potential solution that we're coming up with? So this phase concludes with choosing a specific focus for our sprint, as well as the goals, success metrics, and how to quantify the solution that we are coming up. Once defining is done, we move on to sketch. Now, sketch day is the first time we actually start generating and sharing broad range of ideas as individuals first, and then we collaborate as a team. So individuals now can actually explore different ways of coming to the solution, so that different avenues on how we can reach a potential solution, and then we'll have a vote. So everybody's sketches will be up, and we'll actually vote on the one that we choose is the best way to move forward. And that's when we move with a well-articulated solution sketch to our next phase, which is the decide phase. Now, decide phase is actually the pivoting point in the sprint. This is where we actually finalize the direction or concept or even solution that we want to prototype. So each participant will share the solution sketch that they have come up with, And the team will find a consensus on a single idea through decision-making exercises that are taught during the sprint, and choose a final direction that we'll aim the rest of the sprint on. And that will be the focus for the rest of the sprint as we move into our prototyping phase. As explained before, prototyping is where we actually come up with the concept, a 3D model or a 3D mock-up of what exactly our solution is going to look like. And this is where many decisions are made around what exactly the concept is, what will include, what will not include, how do we refine it? Because still now the solution has been raw. It has not been refined. Prototyping stage actually helps us to refine it and make it as real as possible for our users to actually come in and give us their feedback when we move on to the validation, which is the next phase. Now, this is the end phase of our design sprint, where it's the moment of truth. We have come up with different ideas. We have voted on one particular solution that we want to move forward with. And now it's time to let the bird out of the nest and see if it can fly, to see if our solution that we have worked so hard on actually can be validated and is useful to our users. Now, it's not important that we find success in this stage. Sometimes we will fail. Sometimes what we came up with in the past 5 days is not what the user wants. And that is okay as well. Because it's not about getting a validated concept. It's about actually understanding, do we put our efforts into this solution, into this problem, or to move on and focus on something else. Either way, we learn something out of the sprint cycle. Now that we finish the sprint, it's time for wrap up. During the wrap up, we actually do an archive of everything that has happened during the sprint. We send out email communications. Maybe there's a follow-up design sprint you want to conduct. Maybe the 5 days was not enough and we want to explore the ideas a little more. That's possible. We also have survey templates or feedback forms to see if the sprint went well. And of course, we send out the material so that we can start moving into our traditional thought process and actually make whatever prototype we came up with into an active solution and move forward with the process. Now that we understand the breakdown of the sprint, how do you actually introduce this to your company? How do you actually make this part of your organizations? Well, design sprint is, if you're in the product world, you're probably familiar with the agile development method, which is something that we use across the board. But at the end of each sprint, the development team actually releases a new feature or an upgrade or functionality. That's how the agile development process works. But in reality, this ideal scenario rarely works because it's not how it's intended. There's a lot of flaws in the system. Things can go wrong. So to understand why, it's important for us to understand the business ideas. The business stakeholders will request maybe new features, but why is that required? Is it only because the business wants to maybe upgrade the update, maybe just put out something into the market in quick succession? This will actually help us validate if it is required for our users, why users actually will accept this particular solution that we come up with. And of course, no organization is going to say no when you say it's the least time investment, least money investment to actually get a validated product. Also, it allows us to experiment so that we don't spend, rather than spending months and months, we spend just a few days to actually come up with a solution and see if we can move forward with it, right? Design sprint also allows us to frame the problem better, to adhere to who our users are, to make the solution focusing on the user, keeping the human in the center of everything, making sure that our solution is actually accepted by our end users. And this is something that will deeply benefit an organization. Now, of course, before introducing the sprint to your organization, you need to be confident of the process and the steps. Without that, you cannot convince anybody, right? Now you might ask, when do you actually conduct the sprint, right? So there are a few cases where a sprint can be effective. Now, of course, if you break down the different exercises, you can use it at any time. But the separate situations can be when you are on a strict deadline and you want to get things done quickly. When you are not sure, when you are pressed against the wall and you need a solution immediately, but maybe you're not able to think also. So when you hit a wall and you're having a creative block, a sprint will actually help expand the horizon and think beyond what we had imagined. And also when there is a very, very big challenge, when there is something that we are not able to wrap our mind around, when the challenge is so big that we need to experiment a little bit, we need to actually test it out, test different solutions out to see if we can actually solve for that big challenge, right? It can also, and most used is when it's a start of a new project. When the time is there, when you have a new project, when you're just trying to get into grips of what this new project is about, that time the team gets unstuck, we're all in the same flow, everybody's on the same page. So that's also a great time to actually conduct this. Now that we've heard all of these wonderful things about the sprint, you might ask me, what exactly is the value? Why should we do the sprint, right? So when organization approach the potential benefits of the sprint, it's important to actually break down what we are going to get out of it, right? What is the, there are too many design decisions that are taken in isolation. The design team or the product team or the engineering team or the marketing team sometimes is unaware of why the decisions are being made by the CEO, the directors, when left out of that conversation. The sprint actually allows all of us to be in the same room. So we understand why the decision is taken and how to move forward in it. Also, sometimes what happens is we're not preview to business decisions that are being made, business requirements that are being made. And it will also allow us to see the perspective on the other side in another department, how they function, so that we can actually adhere to that in our solution. It also involves our stakeholders. Most often we exclude our stakeholders for fear of them undermining what we want to achieve. Maybe they don't understand what we are trying to do. Maybe they're not getting our vision. But actually including them will give them a sense of ownership, will increase the likelihood that whatever solution you are making, they actually buy into, they actually want to invest in. And of course, prototyping and experimentation, which I've spoken many times today. But it's also to avoid spending too much time writing specifications, but actually visualizing, actually creating this. So instead of creating a document with all the things that we want, all the multiple features that we want, it's important to visualize a solution rather than defining them. And the sprint allows us that wonderful value. And last, but definitely not the least, is the user is the key. So testing with the users, having the user's heart involved in that process, them having an equal conversation about what they want, how they want it, what do they feel. It allows them to be invested even before the product is out in the market. So there's a higher chance that they will buy into whatever solution that you come up with. So it's important to understand that the user is king, consider all the different perspectives. The sprints are effective, efficient, and it manages all stakeholder expectations that we might come off as we begin the design sprint. And it's also the learn fast, fail fast methodology available. So you have already seen this, but I want to show you what the 5-day sprint will look like when it's a 3-day sprint, when we customize. This is how a 3-day sprint actually functions. I know a lot of you might say 3 days is also too much. We might not be able to do 3 days, but 3 days is what I would say as a minimum, because lower than that, it becomes too much, too intense, and it's too cluttered. And all of the things that we spoke about being time boxed will start merging, and we won't get the results that we expect. So this is how a 3-day breakdown usually is for the design sprint. Now, as you know, we will also be conducting a full-fledged workshop about the design sprint and actually take you through the process of what actually happens in a design sprint, where you can see case studies of real life where it's been successful, people have validated solutions, and design sprint is one of those methodologies which I cannot speak about, or you will not understand just by me sharing with you. It's something that you need to experience, something that you need to put your feet in the ground and see what actually happens, because the magic is in that room with your team, actually creating the solution, actually being agile about it, to be hands-on and try out all the different exercises, all the different steps that happen in order to come up with that solution. So I hope that you will join me in the next session where we do a full-fledged workshop. Of course, the event is brought to you by our Garranto team. And now if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And thank you so much. Okay, I think we have some questions here. Hello, can you hear me? Do we have any questions? Hello?
Okay, everyone, feel free to ask questions if you have any of this.
I know it went by very quickly, so if you have any questions, please let me know. I can answer anything that you might want to talk about. Okay, I guess, Emily, we don't have any questions.
Ma'am, before we drop off, we would like to take one attendance photo.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Can we get a photo attendance, ma'am, before we log off?
Yes, yes.
I would like to request everyone to on their camera so that they can take the photo.
I think the rest of them are very shy. Turn on their cameras.
Thank you so much.
Oh, someone's camera is broken. That's unfortunate. It's very nice to see some of you, and it's very nice that the rest of you joined. And like I said, it's something that you got to experience. It's not something that I can talk about. So I hope to see you in the workshop so we can actually get our hands dirty and see what this design sprint is about. And I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you, Yun. Thank you, Team Garranto. And I see you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye. Good.